Good afternoon and welcome to part 4 of this 4-part webinar series, Career Choices and Financial Security. Today, our topic is slowing down before retirement. Can I afford to earn less? Rick Miller, the founder of Sensible Financial Planning and Management, is here to discuss exactly that, slowing down before retirement. Can you afford to earn less? At the end of the webinar, we'll be doing a Q&A. So if you have any questions, please put them into the Q&A box, which is at the bottom of your screen. You can just type them in and then Rick will answer them at the end of the webinar. Thank you very much, and let's go, Rick.
Thanks, Carrie. This is the fourth of a 4-webinar series. In this series, we looked at 4 different career questions: how much it costs to take time out from work, whether investing in more schooling is worthwhile, how best to pursue your dream career, and then this week's topic, whether it can make sense to slow down later in your career. These webinars all share a theme. Financial planning is about much more than just financial assets and investments, and for almost everyone, human capital or earning power is the foundation of financial life. Work decisions are about future earnings, human capital, as much or more than they are about current earnings. And I cut my teeth on the human capital perspective, which was championed by Gary Becker at the University of Chicago, and I had the great good fortune to work a lot with him while I was there. And the last point about student loans is not relevant to this webinar, but when we looked at schooling, we saw that student loans weren't necessarily all bad, that they encouraged us to think carefully about the investment that we're making. Or if you're thinking about going to school, the investment that you're making. So let's move on and think about, can I afford to slow down? And we're going to focus on the financial impact of this decision or this possibility. It may well be that the most important impact, though, of slowing down is non-financial. A family impact, a personal impact, and a financial model can't capture these benefits and costs. But looking at a financial model can help you make the economic and the non-economic trade-offs with more information and more clarity. So why would you think about slowing down before you retire? And in our practice, we see people who talk about this a lot, and the symptoms are frequently the same. I have a great job, but I'm exhausted. I just don't know how much longer I can do this. People who have demanding careers often run out of gas, and then they seek a less demanding career, and they see it as attractive. So teaching, consulting, nonprofit work, less demanding careers are often less remunerative, but they often have non-financial benefits. Frequently, they offer different sources of professional gratification as well, more immediate feedback, and a personal view of results. Now, to look at this question, we're going to go back to Cleo and Jeremy Smith, which was the couple that we met in our first webinar. And at that time, they were thinking about having a child. And now they're later in their careers, and they didn't have a child. And so I'm going to call this the alternate universe for Jeremy and Cleo. They decided not to have children, and at 40, Cleo got a huge promotion, and her salary goes to $250,000 from the $80,000 that she was making. And her job is terrific, but it is extremely stressful. And when she gets to 55, she just can't imagine doing it for much longer. And she's thinking that maybe she can go to 60, but then she's never going to work again. She'll just have had enough. And as she thinks about this, and as she and Jeremy think about this, their financial situation is better than it would have been if they had taken time out, but now they're living a little bit differently as well, and a little bit more expensively. And just I want to remind us as we think about this that there are other things going on in their world than just Cleo's decision. the Social Security benefits are going to continue to be important, and so we're going to continue to think about what will happen to those benefits, and we're assuming that the benefits will go down as one way of resolving the projected mismatch between receipts and payments for the Social Security system. We're also expecting taxes to go up a bit. We're not going to be looking at life insurance for them. And then we have a real rate of return of a little greater than 0.5%. And that's a little higher than we're using now at Sensible Financial, but just a little bit higher. We've reduced it to 0.5% now. So basically the same. So back to Cleo and Jeremy, and she's thinking about what she might do. And she can imagine hanging on until 65. She thinks she's not sure what would happen if she did that. So when we were working with her on the plan, she wouldn't even allow us to use that as a scenario. She can imagine staying in her current job until 60, but then she never wants to work again. Or she could take a less stressful job next year and work until 65, or take a much less stressful job next year and I say cruise until 70. Now, when we're comparing these careers against each other, we're comparing both the earnings and the career length. And that matters because it's the total income that affects your lifetime living standard, not just the annual income. When we think about the longer career, there are substantial advantages to the longer career, even if it's at a lower earning level. From a financial perspective, you get more years of earnings, more years of investment returns, and finally, your resources don't have to go as far. So if she retires at 60, their savings, Jeremy's and Cleo's savings, have to take them from 60 to 100. If she retires at 70, the savings have to take them only from 70 to 100. That's 10 years less. And in a lot of lifetimes, that's more than a quarter of that time, because in a lot of cases, people don't live all the way to 100, even though we plan for that. And secondly, and I've talked about this, but there are psychological advantages often to working longer. You stay engaged, and having a job and having a career allows you to be engaged with a broader range of activities in life. And for many people, their career provides a lot of the meaning in their lives. So working longer, even if less remuneratively, may have a lot of important psychological benefits that go beyond just having more leisure or not having as much stress. But continuing that engagement and continuing to have your work as a source of meaning can be very valuable. And we see this with a lot of clients who have especially medical careers. A lot of physicians tend to work longer, lawyers tend to work longer, but we see people with many different kinds of careers who really love their work, who keep telling us that this is the year they're going to retire, but actually next year is the year they're going to retire, and when they come to see it, next year has become the year after that. People have a hard time letting go of their job, and it's not just financial. Okay, so here are Cleo's options. So she can work till 60, earning $250,000 a year, or she can work till 65 at $125,000 a year, that's half, or she can work until 70 at a much less stressful job, and she'll earn only $83,000 a year. And I say only because $83,000 a year is still a pretty handsome level of compensation. And we're also thinking that working at this level is very stressful, very demanding, exhausting. Working at this level is much less stressful, but still somewhat demanding. And here, this is a job perhaps that Cleo thinks she might be able to do even for the rest of her life. although in the plan and when we look at the scenarios, she's going to work only until 70. Now, for these careers, I've actually carefully chosen the earnings levels so that over the period of time that she's working, the lifetime total income is the same. And you can imagine how this is going to influence things a little bit, and it's a little bit unfair in a sense. I've kind of rigged the game to make it so that the financial impact of all three is the same. But the analysis that we do works even if the numbers are different. So it could be that even though she's planning to work to 65, that the earnings could be less than we're assuming here. And yet it might still be something that would be beneficial to Jeremy and Cleo. But I'm going to assume, just for the sake of this discussion, that the earnings are the same. So the total earning income is the same, but the working time is longer. And you could say, well, why would anyone do that, right? Why work longer for less? And I think the short answer is it's just much more pleasant to have the less stressful job. And a lot of people feel that way. A lot of people compare the options, career A with a very high income and career B with a substantially lower income, and say, I'm done with A. I really like the idea of B. And from a financial perspective, that can work just fine. Here, we said that the net income, the net lifetime income was the same. And when I say it's not just the gross income, this is the gross income, but the net income, the income after tax, counting in things like Social Security benefits, retirement contributions from the employer, subtracting out taxes, subtracting out the retirement contributions and life insurance payments. But you see that the net income, the present value of the net income, is just about the same for all three of those careers. Even though it seems a little counterintuitive. In one case, she's earning $250,000 a year, and in another case, only 83. But as I said, I chose it so that the total dollars are the same. Now, it is true that there are differences in taxes because of the timing of income, because of the progressive nature of the tax system. But if you look at the totals down here in terms of taxes, the taxes are in gray. They're pretty darn close. There are also slight changes in Social Security income because of the timing of income and the way the average indexed monthly earnings is calculated and the primary insurance amount is calculated. But the impact is not visible to the naked eye. And because the net lifetime income is the same, their living standard is going to be the same. So I did, Cleo was angry with me, but I did calculate what their living standard would have been if she had worked until 65 at the $250,000 a year. And it would have been almost 100,000. But they weren't spending 100,000, they were spending 75,000. And in each of these scenarios, whether she retires at 60 and never works again because she's just exhausted, or whether she retires at 65 or retires at 70, these consumption spending levels are as close to each other as they could possibly be, and they are all higher than what they were previously spending. And this is actually heartening to them for a couple of reasons. One, Cleo really is interested in cutting back. The second reason is that they never quite believed that she'd be able to keep this job. And this is actually something that we see with a lot of people, especially in technology, who work in technology. They have this I won't call it a terror, but they are concerned that their job might disappear and that they might not be able to earn at the same level. So they were pleased to see that Clio, in fact, did have these options. And it's very interesting that all three of the options allow them to maintain their living standard. The financial differences are tiny, as the net income analysis suggested, and as this analysis of spending confirms. So the bottom line is, it's very often possible to maintain your living standard at a lower income if you're willing to work longer. And the trade-offs are not purely financial. The non-financial trade-offs are significant, and only you can assess. On the personal side, the extra family time, the extra time with friends, the improvements to mental health, and the types of activities that you find meaningful that you may be able to spend more time at while you're still working. A high stress, high commitment job really limits your ability to spend time with family and friends. On the financial side, there may be you may feel less comfortable spending money on stuff or experiences or on your housing if your income is lower. But the as I've indicated, the financial impact can be relatively small. When you're considering how long to work, I'm going to reemphasize what I said a bit earlier, that many people get a lot of meaning from their career. Many people, especially men, define themselves by their careers. And retiring early, while it may on the surface seem attractive, often has a larger negative impact on people's I hate to use the word self-esteem, but it has a bigger impact than people might initially anticipate because of that, because of the importance of their of what they do and saying what they do in the way they feel about themselves and the way they introduce themselves to other people and interact with other people. On the other hand, there's a lot of meaning to be derived from your personal life, from giving back, from charitable activities, and so forth. And one additional benefit that we haven't talked about, but that I would highlight for the longer low pay career, and with less stress and less demand and so forth on your time, is that it gives you more opportunity to think about the other things in your life that are important to you and how you will what you will do with the extra time that you have once you retire. If you've been working effectively all the time and you haven't had time to think about what you'll do when you stop, then when you do stop, there's a lot of time to fill and not a lot of experience and not a lot of thought perhaps about what you will do with the extra time. So the longer, lower pay career with more time for contemplation, more time for being with family and friends and talking about things like that can be very helpful as a way to navigate the transition from work to retirement. And Carrie, I think there we can stop and take questions.
Okay. Well, we do have a question. Lisa asks, do you calculate the net income options from today or for lifetime?
You calculate the net income options from today or for a lifetime. So whenever you do planning, you start from where you are. So we're not looking back and saying, what would Cleo have earned if she had dropped from 250,000 to 125,000 5 years ago? we're, let me go back here. So we're all, Clio is 55. So we're doing all of the analysis from 55 forward. So we're looking at earnings starting at 56 in each of the 3 careers. And we are calculating the lifetime income, but from that point forward. So when we're looking at the lifetime total here, this lifetime total is the lifetime total from 56 through 60 or 65 or 70. Okay, so we're adding up 250,000 times 5 is, I guess we did for times 6, right? It's $1.5 million, right? And 125, so that it all comes out to basically $1.5 million going forward from this point.
Okay, she says, perfect. Yeah, the phrase lifetime earnings was new to her.
Right.
I think. So, okay.
Right. Now, I can talk about this a little bit more. When we, if we're doing a plan for someone starting at 30, and we're going to calculate lifetime earnings, we're going to calculate lifetime earnings from 30 through through retirement, right? If we're dealing with a 40-year-old, we're going to calculate it from 40, because your earnings history is important for a couple of reasons when you're doing financial planning. One of them is that your earnings history is the determinant, your whole earnings history is the determinant of your Social Security benefit, or one of the important determinants of your Social Security benefits. So we start with your history to date of earnings, and then we append to it the earnings from this day forward. And that gives us your earnings history, and that then allows us to calculate, and the Social Security system to calculate, your annual or indexed monthly earnings, average indexed monthly earnings, and your primary insurance amount, which is used in calculating your benefits. Your earnings history also influences what you can earn going forward, primarily in the way that you market yourself to potential employers. But from a financial planning perspective, the only way it comes in is in the Social Security benefits.
Lou asks, in Cleo's case, what would you recommend for her to do?
I never do that. I never do that, because I can only tell Cleo about the financial impact of the choices that she's considering. I can't tell her about the non-financial aspects. I will say, though, that I have a preference for kind of a professional preference for the longer career, and that's for several reasons. The first is that a long retirement is once you stop working, your financial flexibility diminishes dramatically. You no longer have you can't say, oh, I'll just work another year, because once you've retired, it's very difficult to get back to where you were. If Cleo stops earning $250,000 and quits, and then 2 years later they have some sort of financial catastrophe, maybe, who knows, her parents run on hard times and they need support, and all of a sudden Cleo and Jeremy's resources have to support not just them but also her parents. She can't go back and earn $250,000 a year anymore, because all of her connections are gone, her network is gone, her skills have diminished, and so forth. So whereas if she switches to the $125,000 career and says, oh, I can breathe, I can work, I can imagine doing this for a while, if then that catastrophe happens, the financial impact is still the same, but now she has the ability to say, well, I won't retire at 65, I'll work till 70 at the 125,000. And that financial flexibility, that kind of optionality, is very valuable. And then I think also that the things that I talked about in terms of personal time, while still maintaining the meaning that one can obtain from work, right? Having more personal time, but still having a meaningful career. That's a, a very good balance to have, and I think it makes it easier to prepare for life after work. If you've got more life outside of work while you're working, it's much easier to see what you'll do outside after work if you've got time outside of work.
Okay. Andrew asks, you lost me on how they can maintain their standard of living regardless of work income scenario. If Cleo's annual income drops more than 50%, how do they maintain their standard of living regardless of how long she stays in that job? Moreover, in a given year, they don't know how much longer she'll be in that job.
So this is a good question. But the fundamental point, and something that we didn't cover in this webinar, is that we plan on a lifetime basis. So we're looking at lifetime resources. If we look at this slide here, okay, these net resources, the net resources that she's adding, are the same in every scenario. So in each scenario, from 55 on, she's adding $4 million in resources to spread over the 45 years from 55 to 100. And so if we take the resources that they had before and we add $4 million to it in each scenario, we're going to have the same total to spread over the next 45 years. So the amount that they can spend every year is the same, because they've got the same total lifetime resources in every case. And you could think about the cash flow question. How are they going to, where's the money going to come from to cover the spending that they do? And it's going to come from Social Security benefits, right? Which are here in each case, and they are the same, and they are future benefits now, right? So these are benefits that will start arriving after 70. So part of the answer is that they can spend some of the resources that she's earning now because there will be more resources, more cash flow later from Social Security. There'll be more cash flow later from retirement distributions, although in this case they're small, relatively small. And then finally, if they do have savings, I didn't show you the savings, but because she's been earning so much for so long, and because they've only been spending $75,000 a year, they've accumulated savings. And so those savings will be run down over the 45 years as well. And next time I do this webinar, maybe I'll look at the cash flow. But the bottom line is that there are enough resources available for them to be able to spend at the same level. And that's a really important, that if there's one concept here, it's that, right? That if we look back at this and you say, well, goodness gracious, this is much higher than this, which is much higher than this. But if we calculate, if you will, the area, let me see, sorry. I've got to get, I'm just using this for the first time, so bear with me. Okay, so if we think about the total earnings here, what do I want? I want this. If we think about the total earnings in this box, can I get a different color? Yes, I can get a different color. Okay, so, and then the earnings in this box, and then the earnings in this box, They are all the same. That's what the next slide means. That those earnings are all the same. And so another way to ask your question would be to say, well, wait a minute, she's earning a lot here, but how are they gonna support their living standard after she retires? And the answer is they've saved. And so they're going to be able to use the savings that they've accumulated. Whereas with this career where she's working from 60 to 65, right, she has earnings to spend here. Whereas in the first career, she no longer has earnings. She's going to have to spend savings. And in the case of the working to 70, she's going to have earnings all the way to 70. So she's going to have earnings to spend all the way to 70. Whereas if she stayed in this career where she retired at 60, she's going to have to cover spending all the way from 60 to 70. And they're going to start Social Security at 70. So she's got to cover all of that with savings.
Okay. Ed asks, do you find people leaving high-paying jobs in their early 60s then taking a much lower paying job and using both their current earnings and retirement portfolio to support their lifestyle if the lower paying job alone cannot sustain it? Which sounds kind of like what you just said in a way.
It could be, yes. I mean, certainly you can do that. It's often we see people retire completely and then cover. I'm going to get rid of this again here in just a second. So even if we see people retiring at 65, they've still got to cover, and we advise people to not take Social Security benefits until 70. So the only source for spending in this time frame is savings, right? And savings are savings. People tend to look at their retirement accounts and say, well, those are my retirement savings. All of your savings are retirement savings at this point in your life, whether they're in retirement accounts or not. And I think it's important before you say, oh, I can just do this. I can just reduce my earnings and spend for my savings to support the living standard. Before you do that, it's important to plan and see if it'll work, right? And I want to go back to the previous question in just a minute because something just occurred to me. But you want to run the numbers and see if it's plausible. But often it is plausible that you can reduce your earnings and maintain your living standard. It's more plausible if Cleo and Jeremy had been living paycheck to paycheck on her $250,000 salary, then the numbers would have been the same, just as I showed you, but their living standard probably would have to drop because they probably wouldn't have saved enough, right? So having a plan that thinks beyond work and thinks about where the money's going to come from after work is really important, regardless of whether you're planning to cut back or not. Because if you're earning a lot and living paycheck to paycheck, that's probably not sustainable. It's sustainable as long as the paycheck is there, right? But if you're not saving, then when the paycheck stops, when the music stops, the game stops too. So it's important, no matter what your salary level is, to think ahead, to do a lifetime plan. And when you've done that, then this kind of analysis is going to seem a lot more. It's going to make a lot more sense to you. This is, in my opinion, in my professional opinion, this is the right way to do the analysis, doing a lifetime assessment, and that's how this makes sense. I want to come back to the point that someone made earlier, which is that Cleo may not be able to work. There is some question about whether, who knows? She might get sick. She might not be able to work all the way to 70. And that's true. And that's a part of the analysis that I have not done as carefully. if you're thinking about working to 60 versus working to 65, you can get disability insurance to cover you until 65. And that will protect you against the possibility that you might not be able to work at some point here. Once you get beyond 65 or into your later 60s, it's harder to get disability insurance, and often disability insurance won't pay benefits for more than, say, a year. And so you are bearing that disability risk at that point in your life. And that is something that this analysis does not capture. So if you're planning to do things this way, you may want to allow yourself a little bit more of a margin of safety in terms of extra resources, let's say, and spending a little bit less than you could afford, than you think you'll be able to afford to, if you actually can work till 70, to protect yourself against that disability risk.
Sarah asks, what does projected Social Security insolvency year mean?
Let me answer that with a little bit of a long answer. The Social Security system has a board of trustees, and every year the board of trustees puts out a report. And that report estimates for each future year what the tax receipts will be and what the benefits paid will be. And also incorporates the existing Social Security surplus. So from the beginning of time until now, not the beginning of time, from 1935 until now, the Social Security system has accumulated a surplus. They've taken in more in taxes than they paid out in benefits. But now they're paying out more in benefits than they're taking in taxes. And so they're running that surplus down. And each year that we go forward without reducing the amount of benefits being paid or increasing the amount of tax receipts reduces that surplus more. And in 2035, the surplus will be gone, and it will continue to be true that the taxes taken in will be less than the benefits paid out. And at that point, the Treasury will say, we can't do this anymore, right? That we don't have the budgetary authority to pay out more benefits than we take in tax receipts. It's not the Treasury, it's the Social Security Administration, but they've got to go to the Treasury to get their money if they don't have enough in their own coffers. So that the Social Security system will have to say, well, we're out of money. They'll go to the Treasury and say, we need more money. And the Treasury will say, we're not authorized to give you any more. We're not going to get to that point because the Congress will have to do something, or there will be an enormous AARP-led demonstration that in Washington that will dwarf anything you've seen before. People will be really unhappy. They don't call Social Security the third rail of American politics for nothing. So, but that's what's meant by the insolvency year. That's the current estimate of the Board of Trustees when the surplus will be exhausted and the taxes will no longer be sufficient to cover, taxes plus surplus will no longer be sufficient to cover the benefits that are legislated to be paid.
Okay, now we have a question from Heidi. Is there any data showing a correlation between lower income and lower stress? If one can...
Not that I'm aware of.
Yeah.
but I will say that I have experiential data that I have a lot of clients. We have a lot of clients who talk about this a lot, and some who've done it.
Okay.
Go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, that's okay. She's asking because she's considering a move from the technology sector and a for-profit company to a hospital for about half of the pay. She says, I'm aiming to pick up skills that would allow a U-turn back to industry if I decide I want to do that. However, the stress level in the hospital may be just as high as the stress level in industry.
It may be. I think that that's a personal question as well as an industry question. Um, I am confident that there are people in all kinds of people who share a career who experience different levels of stress. And so I think that it would be wise if you're thinking about changing careers to network in the new career and find out as best you can what life is like and see if, and there are stresses in every career. There are responsibilities in every career. If you're working in a hospital, you're responsible for patients, or at least the hospital is responsible for patients. And there are politics in hospitals, and there are lots of interpersonal relationships in hospitals, some of which can be stressful. And so that's absolutely true. But one can look at working hours for certain, um, uh, and one can certainly talk to people in different careers and get a sense of. I can tell you from personal experience that I used to be a management consultant, and I traveled 3 nights a week, and now I don't, and I feel much less stress. Now it could be, you could say, well, you were 20 years younger then, and it wouldn't matter what you're doing now, you'd feel less stress. It's quite possible, but there are many attributes of different careers. There are many attributes of careers and life with careers that vary from one career to the next. And so I shouldn't have talked just about stress. There are uh, your whole life circumstances change as you move from can change as you move from one career to another. The people that you're working with change. The amount of time that you're spending working changes. The amount of time you spend going back and forth to work changes. The amount of time outside of work that you're spending that where you're officially off duty, but checking email, checking voicemail, that varies. And all of those have an impact on your quality of life.
Yeah, okay, we have a couple more. And I think you've answered Lisa's question, because she was asking if you've seen clients who stepped down from demanding positions into being part-time consultants in the same field. Did they, well, she's saying, did they keep the value of their human capital? But I'm not.
Did they
Human
keep it as
capital means
high?
something a little bit different.
That's a really good question. Um, uh, I don't think I have good data on that. I think I would say that it's unlikely that they would be able to return to the same level of earnings that they'd had before. But it's not, I think it's less unlikely than it would be if they had completely stopped.
Right. So here's, we've got, I'm going to do 2 more, okay? Let's see. Here's one. Lou asks, why do you project their living expenses to slightly tick up from the current $75K a year after retirement?
I'm not projecting that, but let's go to that slide. I think she's looking at this and she's seeing a slight increase here, right? And these are actually not, these are not changes over time. These are changes from one scenario to the next. So this scenario is slightly lower than this one in terms of spending power or consumption levels. And this one is also slightly lower than this one. It's not infinitesimal, but it's less than $1,000 a year, but it rounds to $1,000 a year. But that's these bars here indicate the change between one scenario, or the difference between one scenario and the one adjacent to it. And you see here that the large difference, the large decline between the base which would be working at $250,000 a year till 65, and the one where she retires at 60. They could spend almost $100,000 a year for the rest of their lives. If she worked to 65 in her $250,000 a year job, they could spend only 78 if she retires at 60.
Okay. Okay, there's also, and you did talk about this, and you have a graph that deals with this too. We were wondering, how does earning a lower income before retirement affect Social Security benefits?
Okay. So the first thing I would say is that I have an article on my Forbes blog that talks about how Social Security benefits are determined. And I'm not going to say, and therefore go read the article. I won't say anything. I'll tell you how it works basically. So Social Security looks at your 35 highest years of earnings, but there's a limit on the amount of earnings that they look at each year, which is called the Social Security maximum. So in the case of, if we go back here, I believe that both 250,000 and 125,000 are above the Social Security maximum. So the difference between scenario A and scenario B is that Cleo's going to have 5 more years of earnings. Now, the next question is whether Social Security takes the highest 35 years of earnings, but it's not nominal earnings. It's what's called indexed earnings. So they're adjusting earnings all to the same year, all to dollars of the same year. So if you earned $50,000 one year, and that was below the Social Security maximum, and the price level has doubled, then for the purposes of Social Security, they would count that as $100,000 of earnings, because they're going to bring it all to the same year. In this case, Cleo has a lot of years of $250,000 of earnings, 40 to 55 already, 15 years of that. So 15 years of maximum Social Security earnings. And then she has a long history before that of earning $80,000 a year. So she's got another 18 years before that. So she's already got 33 years of earnings at a pretty high level before she's making this decision. So whether they're $250,000 years or $125,000 years or even $83,000 years, they're not going to influence her average indexed monthly earnings that much. There's another factor that plays in, which is that Social Security benefits are not proportional just to that average indexed monthly earnings number. It's also progressive and graduated. So the first few, or I shouldn't say few, but like the first $10,000 or so of, that's not the right number. The first chunk of earnings is replaced at 90%. The next chunk is replaced at 32%, and the last chunk is replaced at 15%. So these earnings at this point in Cleo's life are probably in that last chunk. So the impact on her Social Security benefits is going to be small because she's already got a large history. These may or may not be incremental years, and if they are incremental years, they're going to replace years that were already high earnings years with even higher earnings years that aren't going to be rewarded that much with higher benefits.
Mm-hmm. Okay, and there's one more question that I can just answer. Diane was asking, will we be able to see this recording? she asked if we can download the sheets, I assume the slides. Well, you can definitely see the recording. You can go on the Sensible Financial website and look under webinars, under financial planning webinars, and you will see all the webinars so far. And then this one will get up there sometime very soon after today is completed. Okay. But I think that's all the questions we have time for right now.
Okay. Well, it has been a pleasure. Let me just walk through here to the end. Okay, so again, this was the fourth of 4. We looked at how much it costs to take time out from work, whether investing in more schooling is worthwhile, how best to pursue your dream career, whether it can make sense to slow down before retiring. And as Carrie said, the recordings are available at sensiblefinancial.com. And thank you very much for joining us. The contact information is here, website, our address, social media, and our San Diego office as well. Thank you again very much, and have a good afternoon.